Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel for healing. If you're new here, please allow me to welcome you to the podcast that challenges you to take a good look inside of yourself to reveal, heal, and fall in love with all of the pieces of who you are. My name is Ashley Akers-Smith, and I want to invite you to walk with me as I share how my passion for personal growth and healing has led me on a journey to have a much, much deeper and stronger connection, not only with the physical world, but the spirit world as well. Now, I believe that real connection is possible once we actually take the time to understand what it really means to unapologetically emerge in the world as our true and authentic selves. And I'm committed to showing up and to creating a space for you to be exactly who you are. So I want to ask you to please join me as I lean in, get vulnerable, and share with you the good, the bad, and the very best of what my journey back to myself has truly allowed me to discover. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for being here, for showing up and being present with me today. And I want to remind you, as I always do, that you are right on time. And I'll continue to say this as a reminder to you that you are not here by coincidence. Okay? It's no mistake, it's no accident that you're here. It does not matter how you got here or even why you showed up in the first place. It doesn't really matter where you are in your journey either. What matters is that you landed right here with me in this very moment. And I'm so happy you did. So once again, I'm incredibly grateful that you're here, and I hope you stick around. So if you've been with me for a little while and you've been listening to my 60-second sparks recently, you may have caught the quick tip I offered up, I think it was last week, about the ego and that energy versus the soul energy, which is like your true higher self. And today I kind of wanted to talk to you about that again in a more depth way so that you can really better understand the difference between the two, but more importantly, so that you can start to become much more aware of when you're operating from your ego self versus when you may be operating from your soul energy, or what I like to refer to, like I said, as your true self or your higher self. So when we can actually begin to discern between these two different things and become much more aware of exactly how we are showing up in our lives, it can really allow us to spend more of our time and more of our energy showing up as our truest, highest selves. So first, I want to talk about kind of what each of those things looks, sounds, and feels like, and the difference between the two. So ego is kind of like the filter that we use to see the world around us, right? It's sort of this collection of beliefs and desires and ideas and fears that we've sort of kind of picked up and collected and adopted along the way from others and from our own experiences throughout our lives. And our ego actually, believe it or not, develops between the ages of 2 and 3 years old. How crazy is that, right? That we're so young when it starts to develop. Now, your ego is just as much a tool as your soul is. And the key is you have to let go of what you think your soul wants in order to make possible for what your soul truly intends. And there's a big difference. Your ego is the part of you that really tries to control everything. And it always consistently wants to be in charge. It's the very fearful and the incredibly manipulative part of you, and it will distract you from knowing your true self. So you have to be really careful. Your true self, on the other hand, is your soul, and it's your spirit, and it's what feels right and true to you. It's the truest essence of your heart, of who you are and who you were prior to so many of your influential life experiences, right? So your ego kind of acts from this place of fear, and it rejects that true self, that higher self, and others out of a lack of self-love. And it's really important to understand that when we operate from our ego, we focus on things like who's right or wrong. We blame and we shame. And this is where we can sometimes really act from an incredibly judgmental place versus a really loving and compassionate place. So ego is not only judgmental of others, but it's incredibly judgmental of ourselves. And so ego really denies our true reality, right? It likes to deny what's actually happening because it doesn't view things as they are. It actually just perceives, right? So the ego is extremely competitive and it consistently aims to win. And I actually, when I think about that, I think of so many times when I've been operating from a place of ego and I felt competitive and I wanted to win an argument or win at something, or I didn't want to be wrong. And, just operates from that extremely competitive place. It fights for power and it's ruled by fear. And that's what that is. The ego is a part of us that gets defensive and is demanding and, doesn't like to compromise. It works really hard to impress others and to really seek validation outside of ourselves. It's a lot of times overly sensitive and it takes things personally and it always needs to be right. So I spoke about this in my 60-second spark clip not long ago, and I said it's the loud mind chatter that oftentimes makes us feel extremely anxious. It's that voice that kind of nags us and tries to convince us that we aren't good enough or we aren't worth enough or we're not worthy enough. It's all of those negative thoughts that we can sometimes have. Our ego is really reactive and it's resentful, and it has very much like a victim mentality. It feels unfulfilled on a regular basis, and it never quite feels satisfied with much at all. And it's always begging for more. The ego kind of represses our feelings and it lives in this place of what I like to call survival mode. It's where I spend a lot of my life, a lot of my time. And, this survival mode can oftentimes feel like anxiety or worry or hypervigilance, right? Can you identify with any of these examples? I know I can. I can relate to so many examples. In fact, if I'm being completely transparent, I can tell you completely, honestly, truthfully, that I lived the majority of my life from a place of ego until pretty recently. And looking back, I can actually see it so clearly. I spent so much time there until I became aware that I was doing it. And until I had the ability to really recognize just how destructive it was for me in my life and in my relationships to spend my time operating from that place. And once I became much more aware and open to learning, then I was really able to begin to do the work of truly changing my perspective and recognizing how I was showing up in the world. And once I began this journey of healing, I started to operate more often, much more often, more regularly from my true and higher self and from my soul energy instead of my ego. And so here's kind of what I found to be helpful to sort of make this shift. I stopped ignoring my emotions, right? It's so easy to do that when we feel awful or uncomfortable. And I started to allow myself to really feel them. I stopped avoiding my triggers and the things that made me uncomfortable or unsettled. I started leaning into that. And I committed to acknowledging and to healing my trauma of childhood sexual abuse that I often talk about. I started to really accept myself and my wounds, and I owned them. And I began to truly lean in and give myself grace for the moments that I wasn't able to show up as my true self. And I forgave myself for keeping a secret locked inside of my soul and in my body for decades. And I acknowledged that spending decades trying to convince myself that I was keeping this secret and keeping this peace in my family, when in reality, all I was ever really doing was keeping the secret of someone else who'd spent so many years intentionally hurting me. And I acknowledge that too. I acknowledged that keeping this secret was literally making me sick. It was making me sick emotionally as well as physically. I started having seizures. My heart rate was high. It was very complicated at one point. But I finally realized that without question, I had kept the peace for so many years until I realized that I was keeping everyone else's peace but my own. And the ego is a tough critic. It will judge harshly, and it can be incredibly critical and cruel and unkind, not only to you, but to others. And for years, I allowed my ego self to be critical of others, to judge and to project and to blame and to shame, to gossip and to feel jealous, all because I was so incredibly and absolutely terrified of anyone seeing how imperfect I actually was. So I deflected. You see, it was a lot easier for me to point out the flaws of other people and people around me in an attempt to cover up, excuse me, or hide or camouflage my own. So maybe you can relate to some of what I'm sharing. Maybe some of this sounds like a place that you've also visited a time or two, right? Maybe you spend time in this space currently, or just every now and again. Or maybe you're in this space now. Maybe you're even so comfortable with wherever you are that you don't even know you're there to begin with. But what I'm here to remind you is that it's okay, wherever you are. You see, the ego is the part of the self that sees and really harps on all of our mistakes. But our soul and our true and our higher self really sees from a different set of eyes. It has much more clarity. Our soul really has the ability to recognize important life lessons that are incredibly necessary for our growth and for our expansion. And I was able really to truly start to discern between ego and soul when I allowed myself to grow and to learn and to find the lessons in everything without harsh judgment or unrealistic expectations. And I just spent a lot of time kind of connecting the dots and trying to sort of make sense of why I showed up in certain situations as I did. And that's what has the potential to happen when you really listen to your soul and your spirit. You become so much more aware. Now, I'm in no way suggesting that any of this work is easy. Please don't misunderstand me. But what I am saying is it does get easier the more you can intentionally make yourself truly aware of your habits, of your thoughts, and of the energy that you bring when you show up in the world, not only for yourself, but for others. You see, your soul knows the way, it goes the way, and it shows the way if you listen. The soul trusts the process of what's happening. It trusts the timing of things. It does not try to control situations. It's very unlike the ego. It's able to do this, excuse me, because the soul intentionally lives in the present moment. It doesn't try to escape it. And this is completely the opposite of what the ego has this habit of doing. The ego lives in the past, and it's incredibly fearful of the future. And it does this because it likes to be comfortable. It likes to feel safe and protected. It likes to feel like it can predict what's about to happen. It likes what's predictable. The ego's purpose is to protect us from the pain that we've experienced in the past. And I spent so many years of my life operating from my ego because the ego does such a great job and a thorough job of validating and acknowledging our unconscious beliefs and all of the untrue stories that we continue to tell ourselves over and over and over again. And I operated from my ego because that's where it felt safe. And that's where it felt predictable. And that's where I felt protected. It was predictable for me. But you know what? It wasn't. It kept me stuck. And it made me anxious. And it made me hypervigilant. And it made me jealous. And I allowed it because at the time, I didn't recognize what it was. I didn't have the tools to navigate what it was. I didn't recognize that I was operating from this incredible place of fear because I was so blinded by the need to feel safe and protected at all costs. Now, your soul is a really powerful thing, guys. It has the ability to allow you and give you the permission and encourage you to be vulnerable. It gives you this insight to be aware of your patterns and of your habits and your behaviors. It's kind of like your truth teller. Your soul energy really feels like truth, and it surrenders to the unknown. It's not like it doesn't feel forced at all. It feels like flow. It's felt in the body. It trusts. It's a knowing. So if you've made it this far in the episode, you may be starting to realize that the ego is the source of a lot of conflict and dissension because it pushes you in the direction of feeling the need to kind of like prove others wrong. But your soul energy, however, it has this enormous sense of empathy and compassion. And it recognizes that two things can oftentimes be true because of individual perspectives or experiences in life. And soul is really about unlearning all these true stories that we've told ourselves and other people have told us. It's finding your self-worth and what your real true value is. Your soul sits with your feelings and it's able to regulate and manage your emotions because, again, it lives in the present moment. It doesn't try to escape exactly where you are. It speaks truth without trying to convince you. It's driven and motivated by integrity as well as the service to others. So hearing all that, you now may be wondering if I still get stuck in my ego at times. And the truth of the matter is, of course I do. Absolutely. And you will too. And that's okay. Because in reality, we're human, right? We're imperfect and we make mistakes and we're going to make mistakes. We'll continue to make mistakes. But the important thing is the ability. It's that we have the ability to recognize when we do get stuck. It's important to be able to recognize exactly how we are showing up at any given moment, and also to give ourselves grace when the way that we show up is sometimes, let's say, less than our best. It's important to understand the ego always and consistently exists in this sort of framework that lives outside the present moment. So I want to ask you, where are you spending your time? Do you know? Maybe you've never even thought about it. Maybe it's never even crossed your mind until this very moment. But are you spending your time in your ego, or are you spending your time in your soul? Maybe you kind of tend to split the two, and you have a little bit of like a shared custody agreement at the moment, right? Again, we are human. So maybe you're still even unsure of how you're showing up, and that's okay too. So maybe this will help. Ego is the unawareness. It is an unawareness. And once you start being present and you no longer are living in the past or in fear of the future and what might happen in anticipation of things, then there's no longer space for the ego to thrive. There's not a place for it to live and breathe. It can no longer continue to convince you of old, untrue stories that you once told yourself or listened to other people tell you and try to convince you of. The ego is that false sense of self, and the soul is the true, authentic, highest version of the self that exists within you. So to really simplify it, the ego is very much a me, greedy, right, mindset, whereas the soul is this beautifully collective we mindset. The ego works diligently and is so dedicated to separating us, whereas the soul really allows for true, meaningful, and real connection. The very practice of recognizing the difference between ego versus soul will truly allow you to begin to vibrate on a much higher level. It'll allow you to operate more consistently from your soul energy and your true self, the highest version of who you are. And that is your sweet spot right there. This is the very place where true healing has the ability to take place. And the more you work to clearly identify these two different things, these two energies, you will realize that lack of happiness in your life comes from the conditioning in your mind and not from any outside circumstances, right? We search our whole lives looking outside when what we really need is inside. And when you can embrace the present moment, when you can embrace what's happening exactly as it's happening, the ego has nothing to identify with. And that, my friend, is where your freedom lies. So if freedom is what you crave, then I want to really encourage you to relinquish control. Not easy to do, but I want you to lean in and listen and trust this process of learning who you truly are. I want you to let go of the old expired versions of you. Let them fall away to reveal the beauty of who you are and the light that you were meant to shine on this world. What our soul wants most is for us to surrender, to fully surrender to this very moment, whatever that is. It wants you to listen to that voice and the call of your spirit that is reminding you to stay present in exactly where you are and to trust that right where you are is exactly where you were meant to be. And you are always right on time. So stop questioning it. I appreciate you showing up today. I'm incredibly humbled for you being here and for you trusting me with your time and with your energy, with your soul, and with your spirit. So thank you so much. Thank you just for being here, for showing up, for holding space, for sharing space. Thank you for joining me on another soulful episode of the Channel for Healing podcast. I really hope that today's conversation has inspired you to really discover, maybe connect with, and even heal some of the pieces of who you still may be waiting to be introduced to, all of those beautiful pieces of you. So please don't forget to like, share, and comment so that I can continue to deliver the things that maybe matter most to you and it will allow you to share with other people that you care about in your lives. Go ahead and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you would so that you never, ever miss another episode filled with love, laughter, and enlightenment. Don't forget to check out the Channel for Healing on Facebook and on Instagram. There'll be hopefully some more things that you'll find inspiring, reels and videos and pictures and quotes. And also you can head on over to thechannelforhealing.com to learn a lot more about the services that I offer, how to contact me, how to book maybe a reading with me, individual private reading or a group reading, or even some coaching. And you can also check out there my weekly blog, pictures and videos of live readings, as well as the clips that I mentioned of my 60-second sparks, which I hope will be sure to ignite some added inspiration for you as well. As always, thank you. Thank you for allowing me this space to pour into you today. I will always be so incredibly grateful for the journey that I've been on and for having you as part of this journey right now in my present moment. So until next time, everyone, take care.